I grew up coming here to the Bruce Peninsula in southern Ontario. I really like being surrounded by the trees and the animals and whatnot. But these days, I always bring my gadgets with me. Am I a bad nature lover?
Jerry's Workshop Isis pay-per-view.
We get distracted by lots of things, but it seems like the latest technology is always finding new and inventive ways to push notifications down our throats and feeding us a constant stream of micro-entertainment because our eyeballs turn ad space into gold. It's really hard to tame all of that. But this kind of technology, like any tool, finds its value in how we use it. When I use my camera to try and capture some nature here, I'm actually focusing more on the world around me. And if I make a game about nature, which I sometimes do, I have to actually think more about nature as a system, as a living, breathing thing. Speaking of which, it's project time. So I've been working on this crude little prototype that lets you wander around the Toronto area as any one of several native wildlife species. None of this is my original art. The animals here are free assets by Quaternius, who has a Patreon, by the way, and you should totally contribute if you can. And the world itself is generated by a Unity plugin called simply World for the vowel averse. It reads map data and spews out a simplified representation of real-world spaces. Now, I basically just smushed these two things together. So as a piece of interactive art, it's admittedly very simplistic. You know, the juxtaposition of wildlife that we might consider other or outside into familiar urban environments and all that jazz. But it amuses me, and I'm kind of interested in extending this with more sophistication in the animal behavior and the sort of ecosystem modeling. Isn't it a bit weird, though, to make something using this very advanced technology which aims to get us to identify more with nature? Wouldn't it be better just for everybody to go to a national park or something? And yeah, of course, this is no substitute for being in nature or anything like that, but that's not the point. Like any artwork, it's supposed to capture something that the artist sees. In this case, I'm kind of just screwing around, but I like to think there's something about these wild animals that are actually very close to Toronto where I live, but we sort of don't see them in that environment, with the exception of certain species. But they're very nearby, and sort of putting them in the center of our urban environment without all the people in it, I think, makes a connection there that might be interesting. Anyway, some would argue that a painting of a fox is somehow a better representation of nature than a video game that includes a fox, because, after all, painting dates back to the beginning of civilization. We've been mucking about with pigments and brushes and things since we really had any kind of language, and therefore maybe it's closer to nature, ... I would argue that as a medium, games have a unique expressive power in their ability to represent systems, which includes, the rules by which we live, the relationships that we have and that animals have to each other, etc., and even value systems. For example, in our simulation here, each animal has goals, the ultimate of which is, of course, survival, and rules, which require some strategy to navigate. So, for example, the red fox is territorial, and it adapts well to sort of the low-rise residential blocks that are, defined by these asphalt boundaries. A deer might thrive in the open air of box mall parking lots or something where visibility is great and there's lots of room to run away. A raccoon, normally at home in an urban environment, might actually start to struggle without the humans to supply compost bins that they can knock over. Which reminds me, Punches Bears is working on a game called Raccoons, which is super exciting, and you should check that out too. Anyway, maybe using interactive media to talk about nature is just part of being a nature lover in the digital age. Like sitting under the forest canopy to write on your laptop, or, I don't know, Instagramming that rattlesnake you almost stepped on. Oh, if you'll excuse me, it's a beautiful day for taking some selfies.